Hello, my name's Jade and welcome to the beginning of my reading vlog. I don't do reading vlogs very often, but it's spooky season. Can you see by my decorations? And I'm not a huge horror reader. I read a few horror books that are up there. I'll give you a close-up. None of them were super duper scary though. Like, I've only read one or two books that actually scared me. What Moves the Dead was kind of creepy, to be honest. That might be one of the ones that was like, I didn't love that. I didn't love some of the things that happened in there. The one that scared me the most is Ian Reid's I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't even technically a horror. Like, I think people do define it as a horror and I would say it's a horror. But when Ian Reid wrote it, he didn't set out to write horror. Like, he thinks of this as a psychological thriller, which I agree with. It is a psychological thriller, but it's also the scariest book I've ever read. This is the kind of horror that I like. Like, psychological, I think, is definitely my thing. Like, vampires and demons and maybe ghosties. Ghosties might get to me a little bit sometimes. But like monsters, like that kind of horror, like some of these, that's what it is. And that I don't really care for. Like, I don't find that particularly scary because in my mind, like, I know it's make-believe. It doesn't mean to say it can't be scary, and like, no judgment for anyone who does find that scary. That's just not what gets me going. Other thing that I have found a little bit creepy is when I read the Unbecoming Vampire Diary for the first time, and like Mara thought she was seeing things, like she saw a reflection of someone in the mirror. I read that late at night and I got chills. And I was like 20 at the time. I wasn't even young, but I mean, I was young, but you know what I mean. I have a feeling I'm not going to be a huge fan of body horror. Like, I really think psychological weird. Like, this felt just so uncomfy. I think for this book, that's the first word that comes to mind. It was so unnerving and strange and just off the whole time. That's what I want to read more of. And now I have had in my mind a list of books that feel like horror that I've been low-key putting off reading because I don't read horror and I'm a little bit intimidated by. And I thought to myself, why not try and read some horror this Halloween? So that's what this vlog is. I'm going to try a bunch of different horror books, see if I can get scared, see how I feel about them. So on the list of things I may or may not read, I mean, I know, spoiler alert, I'm filming this at the end. I just did the wrap up of this video, the outro. So I know what I read, but at the beginning of this vlog, I didn't. I was very much willing to go with the flow. So this is the list of books I had prepared of what I may or may not read. We have Foe by Ian Reid. This is another book by him. I've been wanting to read it pretty much ever since I put down I'm Thinking of Ending Things. We have Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I know this one's more sci-fi horror kind of. This one has been on my mind for a really long time. I've heard a lot of really good things about it. It sounds like it's gonna be spooky. It sounds like it's gonna be weird. I've seen the trailer for the film. If I like it and I want to, I'm more than happy to continue on. I know that it's a trilogy turning into a series. A fourth book is coming out this month at some point if it's not already out. So I'm also might end up reading Authority and Acceptance, the second and third book in this trilogy. Also by Ian Reid, I'm not so sure on this one. We have We Spread, which I feel like probably isn't for me based on some of the things, but I might. The audiobook is on Everend, so we'll see. Mona Awad, I've never read any Mona Awad books, but I would consider checking out literally any of them. So that's All's Well, which I actually do already own. Rouge, I know Rouge is the audiobook for this one is also on Everend, so this one would also be really easy for me to read. And Bunny. Bunny I don't think I'm gonna get to. This is like the least likely of the three because I don't own it in any, like, it's not an audiobook and I don't own it, so I'd have to like go out of my way to get Bunny, and I feel like that one's the least horror feeling of them, but I'm not sure why I think that. And then we have Julia Armfield. I've never read a Julia Armfield book either. We have Our Wives Under the Sea and Private Rights, and I want to read both of these so bad. I've been wanting to read Our Wives Under the Sea ever since it came out and it got all the hype, but I also think the premise of Private Rights sounds so good, so I would be more than happy to read either of these. I know that the audiobook for Private Rights is on Everend as well. And then there are a couple of wild cards. Is it called Ghost Wall by Sarah Moss? I've been hearing a lot about that one recently. I think the audiobook for that one is on Everend as well, but I think I've sampled it at some point and I don't think it's the best. This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. I think a lot of people who like I'm Thinking of Ending Things like this one as well. I've not heard a ton about it. It's very mysterious, but the things I've heard about it have been good. Yeah, I think those are all the books I had in mind, and actually I never did an intro for the first book, so I'm gonna do that now. The first book I read is Foe by Ian Reid. I'm not going to go super into the synopsis of this one because it is very mysterious, and so I don't want to give too much away. It follows Junior and Henrietta. They're married. They live very away from civilization on an old farm. Farms aren't really used anymore. This is set in the near future. And a stranger comes knocking at their door. They're both puzzled. They don't get company ever, pretty much. And so the stranger comes knocking on the door and he has some news for them. Is all I'm going to say. Roll the clip of me reading this book. I've started reading Foe. I checked Everand because I'm listening to the audiobook on Everand. I think both the audiobook and the ebook are on there. And I checked it this morning and I distinctly remember thinking I was like about a third of the way through, and I was surprised because it's only a short book, but I just checked and it looks like I'm 2/3 of the way through, so I thought it might be time for a check-in because it's very likely that I'll be finishing it tomorrow. I read 2 books at once. I listen to one in the morning when I work out and like get ready for the day and stuff, and this has been that. I'm not sure how horror it actually is. It's very different from I'm Thinking of Ending Things tonally. I'm Thinking of Ending Things had this just like uncomfy vibe the whole time, and this one is kind of mysterious and weird, but it definitely feels more like sci-fi thriller rather than like psychological thriller horror leaning. That's not to say I'm not enjoying it though. I am enjoying it. I am thinking about it all day long. Like I'm actually even tempted to just keep reading it tonight. Like that's how invested I am in it. I think I knew too much about the synopsis before going into it. I reread the blurb to be like, is it the blurb? Does the blurb spoil things? And I wouldn't recommend reading the blurb. I think it's one of those that you just want to go in knowing as little as you possibly can. I think if you go in knowing the full premise, at least the way I'm connecting the dots is easy to figure out. This is like, again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm on a completely wrong train of thought. I would be delighted if I am, but I can see the crumbs. I can see the clues. They're connecting in a way that lends to my theory, which makes me think I know what's going on. It's just like the why. Why is this happening? Like those crumbs, there's a lot of them, and there's a lot of like little things that you can start to like try and figure out why these things are happening. I really want to annotate this book. I think it'd be a really fun one to annotate. Problem being, it's not, I don't own it yet. I've ordered it. I ordered it over a week ago and it's not here. I don't know where it is. I emailed customer service today, and like if I finish it tomorrow morning, by the time it gets here, it's gonna be too late. Unless I skim through it knowing, I don't know. I've written down a bunch of my theories on a notebook though because they were just bubbling inside me. I couldn't take it. And like the little connections I've made, obviously I can't really share them because spoilers. Definitely also a commentary on the world at large and like technology. Like I didn't know it was as sci-fi as it is. Like I know it had to do with space and stuff, but I didn't know that it was set in the future. I don't think it's distant future. I think it's actually pretty close future, but it is definitely future. And it's well written. His writing style is very meticulous, like almost overly so. Like it was literally described exactly how this guy flossed. Like it was like, I wrapped the string around one index finger and then I wrapped it around the other, and I know how we floss. And it's very much like stream of consciousness were in our main character's head, very similarly to I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Like the narration does feel similar. I don't know. I really hope I haven't figured it out. At the same time I kind of hope I do, because I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm excited to see how it comes together. I honestly didn't actually think I was that far in. It's very slow, it's very literary. I was also supposed to mention the fact that I am starting Annihilation tonight. Book 2, yay! Hopefully this one's a little more. I think this one's probably gonna be the most like horror-y ones of them all, potentially. I don't know. Look at this cover, it's so gorgeous. So, it's the next morning. I have updates. Finished Foe. I'm fresh off the press. It was basically exactly what I thought was happening. Like I know I talked last night about how I wasn't sure about like the whys. Due just to the nature of things, you can make an educated guess, and so I made an educated guess. That doesn't mean to say that it was any less kind of like horrifying when things came to fruition. While I knew what was going on, I don't think I fully understood the consequences, and so that it was emotions were felt. I did have me second guessing myself. Like I did see a couple other paths. There was like a red herring. But ultimately it was I just knew too much going in. The annoying thing is, it's not even like I figured this out over time. It was my immediate, like, as soon as I started reading the book, because this is the premise, I think this is what's happening, and then it was exactly that. Still found it very entertaining. I read it very quickly. It was really interesting. It brings up a lot of interesting ideas and thoughts, and that's kind of what makes it horrifying. And the symbolism in there is really well done. The way I was able to connect the dots the way I want to, and I still kind of want to annotate it when I receive my copy, shows how well written it is. It's just frustrating that I knew too much going in. I mean, the clues were well done. The fact that I had that inkling and then I was like, okay, all of this is supporting my theory, shows that like the seeds were well placed. Maybe if you didn't know as much going in, you wouldn't be able to guess it. Maybe it's just somewhat predictable. Maybe it doesn't matter. I do like the ending. It goes on a little bit longer after things are revealed than I expected it would. And that was really interesting and entertaining. It's really hard to compare it to I'm thinking of ending things, because with I'm thinking of ending things, I had zero clue. This has a very different nature to it as well. It's much creepier. I was uncomfy the whole time, whereas Faux isn't quite. Faux is just like, this is weird. I don't know how I would compare the two. I kind of feel like I like Faux better, mostly just because I remember being annoyed when I finished I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I think because all of what I thought was going on was so not what was happening. I know he has another book. I was tempted to add that to the reading list for this vlog. Maybe it will still find its way in there because the audiobook is on Everend. But I know that one has, I think it's something to do with like an old people's home, and it talks a lot about death, and that's really, I don't know how I feel about that, that I don't do well with those kinds of topics. But I really liked both of his other books, so I'm tempted. What would I rate Faux? Really hard. I think had I not known what was happening, it could easily been a 9. But because that like affected my experience, and that's not the book's fault, but like in terms of the reading experience, I think I would have enjoyed it more had I not known. It was still very satisfying, don't get me wrong. I still enjoyed the reveal. I'm leaning towards an 8. I think an 8 sounds pretty respectable and makes sense to me. Also, like I said, started Annihilation last night. I cannot get over this cover. I'm halfway through it. That was not the intention. I knew it was short. It's only had like 195 pages, and I thought if I spread it over 3 days, it's like 65 pages a day. That sounds doable. But I was so invested, I just kept reading up until the halfway point. So I've read like the first 2 parts. In Annihilation, we're following an exploration team in this world, which is Earth. In this world there is an area penned off called Area X, and we don't know why it's been penned off. We don't know what's going on in there. We don't even know for how long. They keep spending in these expeditions to try and like record the goings on, at least. Like a biologist, an anthropologist, a linguist, a psychologist, a surveyor. At least those are all the people that originally get sent in this group. This is the 12th expedition. Weird things keep happening. People either don't make it home, or they make it home, just show up at their houses, like no warning. So weird things obviously occurring in Area X. And so this is the 12th expedition. It's a team of all women. It's like one of their experiments to see if like that will affect it, if the results will be any different. Southern Reach, which is the name of the trilogy / series, is now going to be 4th book, is like the area of the government that like govern Area X and are like to do with all things Area X. Just now realised I'm filming this on my phone, and my notes are on my phone. So let's see how many I can remember. The writing style kind of reminds me of the writing style of Ian Reid's writing style. It's also very methodical and very kind of blunt and matter of fact in different ways. They're both also very stream of consciousness, like you're very much rooted in your main character's perspective. Methodical in a different way though, like where that one was like all of the like benign details, this one's like actually kind of brushes over a lot of actions and happenings in a more sweeping way, and it's more like the descriptions are so exact that to the point sometimes I have no idea what they're talking about, and they're talking about like weird things. Like at one point they're describing this, I don't fully, is it a trail? They like liken it to a snail trail, but then at the same time they're talking about goo on the stairs, so is it like absence of goo and like is it footprints? I really didn't, I couldn't imagine it. I had no idea like what to think of. It was so precise, like the details were so precise, and I think it works for the writing style and for this story. I can't picture it. I don't know what's going on. Another thing with the narration is that it's not told linearly we keep like jumping back to her past. We're learning bits about her over time. She is also talking to us. Like, I assume she's writing this in her journal. All of the people that go into Area X get a journal to record what happens. She's kind of like addressing us at times, and she was like, at one point she told us like a key piece of information. She's like, I'm sorry I didn't tell you this sooner. I didn't want it to like affect your judgment of me. I'm enjoying the narration. It's really interesting. I'm enjoying the way it's not told linearly. When that reveal happened, I wasn't expecting that. Again, I kind of got quite emotional. Not a lot has happened so far. I don't know if that's like why I've read so far. Like, a few weird things have occurred, but we've barely explored any of Area X. We've explored this one place and we spent pretty much all our time there. I was expecting weirder. To know that it's a film and I'm halfway through and like barely anything has happened, I'm thinking like, what's happening in the last half? And I'm also thinking like, how did they make a film of this? How is the pacing of the film going to be different? I am hoping to watch both Foe and Annihilation because they both have film adaptations. I don't know if I'll get to do both of those during this vlog. I will try to. Yeah, I'm not really sure where we're going. I don't really know what's going on in Area X yet. One thing that I have noticed is, you know that thing that went around the internet, like, would a woman rather be alone in the woods with a bear or a strange man? It's giving that vibes a little bit. And I noticed this very, very early on. Like, I thought this, like, you're stuck in this weird place with some people that you've trained with, but you don't really know. This seems kind of sus. Is this like some government situation where the government know more than they're letting on? I would pay good money to say yes. How much are the government controlling what's happening though? How much do they want what's happening to be happening? How much input do they have? IDK. I think I'm gonna order the second book today because I'm almost definitely gonna finish this baby tonight, and I have a feeling I'm gonna want to start the second book immediately. Things are going well. I'm not necessarily spooked, but I'm enjoying both. I enjoyed Phil and I am enjoying Annihilation, so positive vibes. So it's the next day. I have finished Annihilation. I didn't enjoy the last half as much as I enjoyed the first half. By far, I would say. I found the last half really slow and quite boring. Part of the beautiful irony is the one thing I forgot to mention in my last update regarding this book was I had written in my notes that I'm much more accepting of the mystery as opposed to Foe. Like, Foe's really a mystery driven book, like that's what you're going on, whereas this one I was like, I'm just here for the ride, I don't care. And then I think my biggest problem with it was that there wasn't enough. The last half, our main character is isolated and alone a lot more, so it's a lot more just thinking and theorizing and thought experiments. There's a lot of like hypothetical, there's a lot of mystery where our main character is cut off. All she can do is speculate. There's no way to prove any of her theories, really, because it's all hypothetical and what's going on is very strange and weird and abstract. It's just too slippery. Because of that as well, like nothing really had any consequence, especially because of our main character's rationale. So it left me with kind of like, well, why do I care? The topics it discussed are interesting. It's really interesting, and there's a much more human, I'll say, storyline kind of running through that made me really quite emotional, like really emotional at times. I teared up, and it really, like, that aspect of the story has really stayed with me and is really haunting me. I watched the trailer for the movie, and they've definitely like taken liberties and changed things, which kind of answers my question for like, how is this a film? It's so slow, barely anything happens, it's all just like theoretical. Well, they changed it. I don't know, it's interesting. It talks, I think, there is crossover between this one and Foe in that they're both sci-fi horrors, kind of mysteries. I feel like this one's more sci-fi leaning and Foe's more mystery leaning. Like, it definitely is creepy, don't get me wrong, but it's like definitely not scary. Although I know horrors like don't have to be scary, but I don't know. What is a horror? I don't understand it yet, clearly. And they have, I think, overlap in the themes and what they discuss. They both talk about what it means to be human to a degree, our place in nature and evolution, but then they go in very different directions with them and they kind of micro dissect different things from there. Both of them look at relationships and human relationships a little bit, but in a very off the cuff way as well. But they have very different feelings to them. I mean, this is just a very strange book. It's a very, very strange book. I do have the second one, as promised. I really kind of don't want to read it. I'm really not in the mood. I finished this one and I kind of felt violated. I stayed up quite late finishing it. Like, I read it in 2 sittings, which, even though it was a short book, for me is still pretty impressive. And I just felt like I needed a palate cleanser, but I had to go straight to bed, and then I woke up this morning feeling really like discombobulated. But the book I would like to read, Our Wives Under the Sea, still isn't here. Though did come today. I don't know where it is right now, but it did come, and so I will annotate it. But what is here is Authority. So I probably will start it tonight. I also like want to keep the ball rolling in terms of the trilogy, because I do want to read the full trilogy. I don't know if I'll read the last book in this vlog. We'll see. This one is much bigger than I was expecting as well. I knew it was longer than Annihilation. I didn't know it was that much longer. It's like 300 and something pages, I think. I know we're reading from a different perspective than we did in Annihilation. I think we're now outside of Area X. We're like from the government's perspective, I think. So I am very interested, and I'm wondering if we're going to get some more answers. Here's the thing though with Authority, Annihilation as well. I like the premise. I like the topics. I like the weirdness of it. I even like the aloof narrator and the writing style. It's just that there wasn't enough for me to go off of. I just got bored. So I think this setup could still work for me. It just needs a different plot. And so I'm wondering if I'm going to like the second book or even the third book more. So fingers crossed. I did start another book this morning, my new audiobook that I listened to. What an astute observation. I went back and forth a lot with what to read. I was really tempted to read Private Rights by Julia Armfield. I sampled a few different audiobooks, and that one, the beginning, was the most compelling, but I feel like I recognize the voice of the narrator, and I think she has a great voice. Don't get me wrong, she probably is a great narrator. I don't know if her narration style is right for the kind of book I expect it to be. And so I even at one point like tried to listen to it this morning again, and I just couldn't do it. I had to turn it off. I feel like it's the kind of book that I'm gonna want to read physically, just due to the writing style and stuff. The other two books I sampled were both Mona Awad books, All's Well and Rouge. And to be honest, I found Rouge, I think I'm more in the mood to read Rouge than I am All's Well, but the audiobook narrator of All's Well was so compelling. It took me a while to like remember to turn it off, and I own it. I was gonna give you the synopsis for it. I'm like 59 pages in, but to be honest, I don't really know. The main character's name is Miranda, where in her perspective is first person. She's a theatre director at a college, and the play they're gonna do is All's Well That Ends Well. She has chronic pain. People don't really believe her. It's kind of been ruining her life. She's pretty isolated at the moment, pretty miserable. The students don't really want to do this play. They would rather do a different play, and she kind of feels like they're ganging up on her. And that's literally all I know. We've been talking a lot about her chronic pain. It's very much in her perspective, but the writing style's really easy. It's very lulling. It's very easy to get carried in. Full of personality. Strong writing is good writing. This is my first Mona Awad book. The narrator is really great. I think that's really the reason why I'm reading this one. The reason I'm not in the mood for it is because I feel like this one's more mystery and thrillery than it is horror again. And I really want to try horror, but it was on the Goodreads 2021 horror, like a nominee for the Goodreads award. But I'm liking this so far. It's very slow though, very literary. They're all very literary feeling, the books I've read so far. Hello. Days have passed. You were due an update. I'm about to say up on a tripod, but I'm scared it's gonna scare her away. So maybe we should just do the update like this. So, You're stealing the show! I am like 190 pages into All's Well. I'm nearly like halfway through. I do have a better idea of what's going on now, but I don't know that I want to tell you because it took like 100 pages to come into effect. Like, if it takes that long and you know that going into it, you're just gonna be waiting for that to happen. I mean, within like the first 50 pages, it's kind of alluded to. It does have a magical kind of property to it, I will say that. I think it's this magical element that makes it classified as a horror, I think. It is very much rooted in our main character's experience, Miranda. We look at her pain a lot, and we spend a lot of time thinking about that because it's so all-consuming to her. I mean, that is also like a lot of what the book is about. It's about how people treat her. It does feel quite literary, it is quite slow, and yet I have been very entertained. I've looked forward to listening to it each morning. The more it goes on, the more entertained I become, the more invested I become. It's an interesting one because our main character isn't necessarily bad per se. I don't think she's bad. I think she's very justified in a lot of the things that she thinks and feels. Then when bad things start happening, it's like how she reacts to it. But then I could see it from her perspective, and I think for a lot of it she's not even that like guilty. It takes a while for her to like do anything that like you could truly say she's okay. Now she's like crossed, like she's actually done a bad thing. Up until a point she's just kind of complicit and she doesn't really know what's going on. It's going to these different like physical therapists and stuff, and it's this ongoing thing of like they're just gonna like make you worse and make you pay for it. And it does kind of get to the point where like you start thinking like, are they purposefully making her worse? Are they purposefully misunderstanding just to like get more money out of her? Surely they cannot be that cruel and that dumb, because they don't seem to know what's going on. Then it's also like the metaphor of like how people don't believe pain. That's a big thing that comes up a lot. All's well that ends well. I don't actually know that play, and I kind of wish I did, because I'm wondering how much it's mirroring. Like there's little things in here that are mirroring just like Shakespeare stuff in general. 3 men keep coming up quite a lot. There's like a motif that's happened a couple times now, and it's making me think of like the 3 witches from Macbeth, which is the other play that the students wanted to do in here. And I keep thinking to myself like, this can't end well, and then I like remember the name and I'm like, haha, but seriously, how is it going to end though? I'm very entertained. The narrator, the audiobook narrator, is doing a really good job. It's really like immersive. The writing is really, really well written. I'm hoping the horror elements come in even, part of me hopes they come in even more, because it was labeled as a horror, but then also part of me is like, but it's doing this really nice fine line between horror, magical realism and literary. Like it's just a little dash, The other book that I'm currently reading is Authority by Jeff Vandermeer, the second book in the Annihilation trilogy. I forget how much I've said about this one. I think I've told you that I've started it. I don't think I've said anything about it, but to be fair, how much can I say when it's the second book in a trilogy? It's about the events that take place after Annihilation. We are reading from a different perspective in this one. We're reading from someone who works for Southern Reach, which is the government that are ruling over Area X, trying to figure out what's going on. And he's new to the Southern Reach, actually. We opened literally on his first day. So it's an interesting perspective. We're kind of learning alongside with him. It is very slow. We've learned a little bit. He's kind of still catching up on things that, the stuff that we know, because we've been inside Area X, that either he doesn't know or none of them know. There's a couple of tidbits that he's picking up that we didn't fully understand because we were from an outsider perspective in the first one. Well, outsider of Southern Reach. So we have learned a few little tidbits. It's quite similar to Annihilation in the narrative style and how we keep jumping back to our lead character's past, but right now I can't really see how it's relevant other than like character building for him and like filling in his blanks. But I don't know how much I care. I am intrigued by our main character. I do quite like him, actually. Let's see, what page am I actually on? I'm on page 117. Third of the way through, at least. It has to be, surely. And again, has much happened? No, it has not. There is one element in here that I can't really go into much detail on because it's a spoiler for both this book and the end of the first book. There's one element in here that I'm really, really intrigued by, and I'm really fascinated to see how it's going to progress throughout this book. I hope it's interesting. Yeah, I really don't have a lot to say. I'm kind of bored by it, but I don't fully know why. I think it's just because of how slow it is. What's happening is interesting. The little tidbits we're getting is interesting. Even just looking around what's going on inside the Southern Reach is interesting. It's just moving very, very, very slowly. And we're not getting a ton. I don't think, as of right now, that I'm going to read the third book of this trilogy in this vlog. I'm kind of hoping we go back inside Area X. I have a feeling that we're not going to in this book. I have a feeling we do that in the last book. Hoping we learn enough in this one for it to be justified. Because there's at least Area X, like, it was slow, but weird stuff was happening, and this one is just like, oh no, your coworker doesn't really like you. And then the third thing I have to update you on is I watched the movie adaptation of Foe. I don't know how I feel about that either. I like the cast, so naturally I liked all the acting. I thought all the acting was really well done. The sets, the costumes, the vibe was really there. The music was great. It just felt really nice. I really liked the tone of it. I think the beginning's really well done. The way they did Terrence was weird. Terrence is the guy that shows up at their house. He was very professional in the book. He was there for a job and he was trying to be friendly, but he kind of crossed lines in the film that I didn't love. I didn't see the point in that. Where Foe is so internal, it's not like an exact adaptation in that like everything that happens in the book happens in the film. They change, like different things, like weird things happen. He acts out in different ways, and a lot of them are based on stuff that happens in the book. Some of them aren't, like towards the end it kind of veers off. But it was harder to make sense of in the film. It didn't feel as justified. Like he started kind of like losing his rationality, and in the book where you're in his head you can see him connect the dots, whereas you couldn't do that in the film. And so when he started acting out, it just kind of felt like he was coming off quite strong. I think it was too short. I think we needed to like have more of the interviews over time. We didn't see very many of the interviews, and that's a big part of the book. It just felt very rash and kind of weird, but in a different way. Like random weird, like intense weird, with like unfounded weird. They did also at the beginning give like some text that we didn't have in the book. In the book everything was really vague. We didn't know when it was set. We didn't know about like the advancements to technology, and we had all of that updated, and the film had a much stronger emphasis on the planet is dying and we need to better ourselves and come up with solutions. And that is very much a thing in the book, but it's really subtle and it's really on the nose. They really push that in the front. It's more about that than anything else. So yeah. I don't know even how much I enjoyed it, not as an adaptation but as a film, because it felt strange. I really think it needed to be longer. My mum watched it with me and she predicted what was going to happen as well, so maybe it's just like a predictable thing. But then again, they had that writing at the beginning, and if you know that going into it, you can guess what's going on. Definitely like the book better. I don't dislike the film. I think like as an adaptation it wasn't the best. As a film it was okay. There was a lot of things I liked about it and a lot of things I just like I didn't really understand. No, for me it's quite middling. I think that's all I have for this update. So I'm just finishing up getting ready and I've been listening to All's Well. Things have started to get a little weird. Disconcerting is the perfect word for it. The horror elements are definitely like creeping in a little bit now, and it's really cleverly done. The way like it's a commentary on the stuff it's talking about, and like the horror elements really work for this subject, like the subject of like chronic illness and like chronic pain. The body horror element of it, but then also like that's already horrifying enough before we add horror elements onto it. I don't know, I just think it works really well. It is also like occasionally experimental in the way it's written. Mona's definitely like playing with the formatting every now and then. And when I say formatting, maybe formatting isn't the right word. Like there's a chapter where she's addressing another character in particular, and there's a chapter where all of the dialogue is basically reported speech, like written in italics. It's kind of like playful and fun and experimental in a very like theatrical way, so it lends very well to like the genre of like theatre and plays. All of these elements are just like lining up very well together. Something I've realised I haven't mentioned yet as well, but is mentioned in a lot of the reviews, is how funny it is. I laughed out loud multiple times. I think I'm around like page 300. We're right before the first production of the play. Something's gonna go awry with this first production, like opening night. It can't go smoothly. Something has to go wrong. It feels like it's Chekhov's gun, because they've been working on this dang play this whole time. This like what the most of the book is about, other than like our main character struggles with like the chronic stuff and the spoopy stuff. So it really feels like I've left off at like a really climactic moment, like especially like there's a big build up to it with the things starting to go more weird and like a little bit creepier. And I can kind of start to see like where this might be going. Like our main character, her mental state is not the best, and it's been kind of on the precipice of this for a little while, but she's starting to get a bit confuzzled. So things are not boding well for this opening night. I don't have very much left of the book at all. Hang on, you're like on it. See, it's very nearly near the end, so maybe like if you think about that, a lot of that could be this opening night and like the fallout of this opening night. If I wasn't working, I honestly would just like finish this book this morning So I'll probably finish it soon. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really enjoying it. Things are gearing up. Things are getting spooky. Ignore my crusty looking mascara. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say. Weird things are occurring. I've not gotten like spooked, but like I can like creepy aspects for sure. Okay, so I have finished both All's Well and Authority. I'll start with All's Well because it's one I finished first and that's what I've updated you on last. I liked the last 50 pages. See why it ended the way it ended. It will make sense. It's fairly satisfying. I think maybe like one of the very few criticisms of this book I would have is I just want one more, not even one more chapter, just like a little bit more in the end. I completely understand why she left it where she did. I don't think everything needs to be tied up in a nice neat little bow. I just feel worried. I feel like I became really attached to this main character. I talked a lot about how it walks a really interesting line of like how a pigeon just flew straight past my window. How... God, pigeon, you've distracted me. How much is she to blame for what's going on? Like, where is her morality at? And I think it might just be because of the type of character she is. You expect her to be a certain way, but realistically, she's not that. I really enjoyed this one. It was really funny, it was really entertaining, it was really easy to read. The narrator, the audiobook narrator, did a great job. I'm really looking forward to reading more Mona Awad now. I mean, I wanted to read Bunny and Rouge anyway, but now I feel like I'm really gonna like them. And then we have Authority by Jeff Vandermeer, the second book in the Southern Reach trilogy. My opinion of this one is very similar to my opinion of Annihilation. Barely anything happened. We learn a few little tidbits that are really exciting about both the Southern Reach and Area X. I wouldn't say a ton. Also very, very slow. Like, kind of get dropped a couple of breadcrumbs and then like a bunch of nothing happens for a while. If there were some really witty characters, some interesting conflict, a really bold, unique writing style, a strong atmosphere, anything else, I don't think it would be as bad. But because none of that is there, the characters are interesting, but they're not really strong, I would say. They're not like oozing personality. The atmosphere in Annihilation was stronger than this one. Like I laughed a few times. I did enjoy our main character. They're just... the character building we get behind him, like, for what? I feel like we know him better in some ways than we knew our other main character. Like, our other main character was quite situational. It was really slow. Barely anything happened. We didn't really learn enough for either of those two things to be justified, and there was nothing else to make up for it. So I really genuinely don't understand how people rave so much. Like, the premise is so good. Like that it's a slow literary kind of leaning trilogy. It's not that I hate slow books, and I think it works well here, but it's too much. Too much of you read it and there's just so much of this. Like, there were parts that I found interesting, but for every part I found interesting there was like a slightly bigger part that was a slog to get through. I know I said this before going into this one. I have a feeling I might like the third book better because we're blending the two worlds together. We might finally consolidate some things, like get on even footing with who knows what. I'm pretty sure we're going back into Area X in that one. Because it's the end of a trilogy, there has to be some kind of there has to be something. Something has to happen. I have forgot to mention, and anyone that's read this is probably like yelling this at me. It has like a pretty, like the last 50 pages, whew, there was like a creepy moment in here that was like, oh, that's creepy, but I didn't care enough to actually get scared. And then things started kicking off. I was like, yeah, okay, now we're cooking and grooving. And then the last like 20-30 pages goes back to being really slow. As things are happening, it's supposed to be like excitement, adventure. And I was literally just skimming. Okay, are we there yet? Like the last couple pages, like when we get there, I couldn't bring it within myself to care. It's hard to say which one I preferred because I preferred this main character. I really liked him. I do think it was interesting. I think I struggled with this one much more, but that's pretty much only because it's longer. If this was shorter, if this was like Annihilation length, but more or less all the same stuff happened, I don't think I'd have a problem with it. I feel like this one's like a 5. I might bump Annihilation down to like a 6, and this one could be a 5 because, like I said, for every bit that I liked, there was a bit that I really struggled through. There was a quote in the beginning of this one that I really agreed with. by Robin Sloan. Robin Sloan! Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour bookstore. Authority isn't just a book that picks up where the last one left off. Instead, it's packed full of new pleasures, not only new characters and setting, but whole new kinds of writing. If Annihilation is an expedition novel painted with a thick coat of weird, then Authority is a spy novel given the same dark lacquer, which makes me desperate to know what the third book is going to be like, where there will be some mixture of the two, Jurassic Park meets James Bond, or some third thing entirely. And I really love that idea of like Jurassic Park meets James Bond. There's a really apt way of looking at them. It's definitely like a spy feeling book. This one I feel like I'd give like an 8 or a 9 out of 10, and then this one's more like a 5 out of 10. Mixed opinions. So far the audiobooks have been doing really well, and then this has just been letting the side down. So I'm on the last book of the vlog, and that is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. I've been wanting to read this one pretty much since it came out. I'm on page 118, which is more or less halfway. It follows two wives. One of them goes out on like an undersea expedition. She goes out on a submarine, and she's only supposed to go there for like 3 weeks, and she ends up being gone for 6 months. When she comes back, she's not quite right. She's a little strange. We're following both of their perspectives. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. That's all I heard before going into it, and all I heard over and over again was like how little you should know going into it. I don't have too many thoughts though, and I mean I can't really speak about the plot anyway, both because of spoilers and because of this one particularly. You don't want to know. Apparently it's murky and mysterious, but I haven't really, not a lot has happened, which seems to be the running theme of this vlog. But what I mean when I say it's a very literary, that's one of the genres. I think it's like horror, contemporary, literary. If I had to put it in a genre, literary is the first one that comes to mind. And because it's literary, it's very well written. The like metaphors and the imagery used in here is really nice. I do think it's maybe like leaning ever so slightly towards the body horror aspect of horror. I can't say I'm loving it. It's not body horror. I haven't actually read a body horror, but I can assure you it's probably not this. But there's a lot of bodily descriptions. Teeth have come up at least more than once, and I don't love it. Just like even characters like imagining things happening to bodies, it really makes sense for the book. It makes a lot of sense. I just don't love it. But that's fine. I'm not gonna hold that against it. Of all of them, I feel like the mystery, other than Foe, in this one is like one of the ones that's really captured me the most. And I feel like there's not gonna be a big reveal. I don't think it's that kind of book. I think the explanations we've been given thus far just are the explanations. And yeah, I keep thinking like, but what? What happened to this dang woman under the sea? Which is interesting because although the books I've read during this vlog have either sci-fi or like magical realism elements in this one, and as far as I believe this one doesn't. And so the fact that this one's like the one that's captured me, is the one that's like borderline freaking me out the most, is really interesting. It does definitely mostly follow like their relationship. There's a lot of flashbacks to like before Leah left, and like our main character, like with her mother a little bit and her other friendships, and just like her as a person in general. It's almost kind of about grief in a way, but the way it's done, because obviously she's not dead, it's really interesting. It's quite sad. I find myself getting sad quite a lot while reading it, but I don't have too many overall thoughts. I mean, maybe it's just too soon to say. Right now it's leaning like at most a 4-star, which I'm kind of disappointed by, because the way this book was described and all the people that loved and adored this book, I have somewhat similar reading tastes with, and so I really thought that would be this for me. It kind of reminds me of when I read Piranesi, and I was expecting to be blown out of the water by it, and I was like, this is really good, but it's not the best thing I've ever read. Kind of within that vein of things where it's really good, and I recognize it's really good, and it's weird and it's mysterious, and the writing's beautiful, and these characters feel really real, and it's a really interesting premise, and it's so far really well executed. But it's that thing that we've already encountered with our friend Annihilation, that it's just not giving me quite enough. Maybe when we start to delve into the mystery of what happened to Leah more, if we do go into that more, but maybe then I'll start to like, whatever it is I'm missing, I'll get. The way it's structured is clever. Like the structure, the different parts of it mirrors the different layers of the ocean. So maybe it's gonna get deeper and darker the more I go, just like the ocean. Who knows? But I am enjoying it. Slightly underwhelmed, but I think that's probably due to the hype. If it didn't have all the hype, I might not be feeling this way. I have finished Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. The audacity of some of the things I said in that first update. There are some things that I think I was wrong about. I'm not going to say what, because spoilers. And there are some things that are kind of murky, like how on the money was I, how I don't... it's one of those where not everything is fully resolved, and I do like that. Would I have been a bit mad if one or two things more explained a little better? Not explained. Explored. Some of the mysteries were explored a little bit more. No. But I can understand why it's left this way. Sarah with an H described, like, compared it to This Is How You Lose the Time War, and I would like say that's a fair comparison. In This Is How You Lose the Time War though, the reason some things are unexplained is because there's a sci-fi world, and so the sci-fi-ness just isn't really that relevant. It's just like the backdrop of what's going on. You don't need to understand it. Whereas in this one, some of the, like, the key fundamental, like, what the hell is going on here isn't fully resolved. But I understand why. I still agree it's very literary in tone. I still think all of the, like, metaphors and imagery and motifs used in here were all really cohesive and worked really well for the story. There were some parts, like with the main character reflecting on, like, her mother and stuff, where I wasn't really sure how it was relevant. Like, I'm sure it was because of how short it was and how well written this was. I'm sure the author had an intention and reason in putting that stuff there. But I couldn't connect the dots, so I don't know if that's a me thing, if I need to reread it, if... It kind of almost felt to me like some comparisons were semi-formed. But I do know that sometimes these things are connected, but it's a very, like, deep down reason, like, to do with, like, character psychology. I'm not too, like, bothered by that either. A really eerie quality to it that I really liked. The tone of it I think was really well done. I can definitely see why people call it a horror, and I think I was on the money with some of my predictions before. Emotions were just all over the place when I finished this one. I've heard people say that, like, grief, how important we are to each other, and, like, a lot of emphasis on sapphic love, and I think it's just kind of about love in general. It reminded me in some ways of, like, normal people. It reminded me of something else, but I can't put my finger on what. And it's really bothering me. Misfits coming together, like, our two characters in here definitely have that, like, misfit, quirky, found their own family feeling to them. That whole thing of, like, when you're strange and there's only one person in the world that can love you and understand you, that thing. And I've read a book like that before and I can't think of it, and it's really bothering me. And I had a feeling like a similar trajectory happened in that one. I really liked it. I don't know if I loved it as much as all of the hype, but then I also have a feeling that this one is one that my opinion can improve over time. The more it, like, sits with me, and if I were to reread it again, my emotions are just very murky towards it. So, like, it could be an 8 out of 10, it could be a 9 out of 10, but I'm not really sure. Maybe one day even a 10 out of 10. I don't know what I want. I'm gonna say like an 8.5 out of 10 right now, but with the huge caveat of that is very subject to change. Like, I think it can go up, I think it can go down, I think it needs to sit with me for a little while, because it's that kind of story. I'm really glad to have read it though, and I'm really excited for her other book. Like I said earlier in the vlog, I did start listening to that one and I'm still thinking about it. So that's one I want to get to towards the beginning of next year for surezies. So that concludes all of the books I read during this vlog. I can understand why all of them were labeled as horror. None of them were horror in the way I was like thinking when I said, like, I'm gonna read horror in this vlog. And I was looking for that more subtle, disturbing horror. I feel like Annihilation is probably the closest, like the most horror-y in that aspect in terms of what I was thinking, like this psychological tour de force, like creepy and weird. Maybe also Our Wives Under the Sea. This one is interesting. It's definitely like literary, people call it very romantic. It's definitely like a love story. But the horror elements, it does get creepy, it does get weird. I didn't find it particularly scary, but it's very eerie and strange, and it's like definitely being stuck under the sea for 6 months. That's a horror premise if I've ever heard one. This one's interesting because the horror elements in All's Well was like fire and brimstone horror, and not so much like eerie or creepy. There is a theme of all of these books. Hang on, I've got the other two here. They're all weird as all heck. Things get unhinged. Yeah, things get unhinged in all of them. All's Well is like probably the least weird on the cusp of it, but then when it gets weird, it gets really weird. I've been trying to think like which one is my favorite of all of these, and I'm really struggling. The one that I enjoyed the most is almost definitely All's Well. All's Well feels the most genre fiction-y of all of these, I would say, which is interesting because I did say it has a literary feeling to it. I think it's the humour and it's because it has magical realism in the most obvious way, and even then it's only a little dash of it. But because it feels like genre fiction to me, for some reason I'm like, it's not of higher caliber. It's really stupid, and I hate that I think that. But I keep coming back towards Foe and Our Wives Under the Sea. I think they're both just so well done. I'm hesitating with Foe, wondering about that predictability thing, and if it is just inherently somewhat predictable. And then my hang up with Our Wives Under the Sea is I don't think I was as obsessed with Our Wives Under the Sea while reading it as I was with Foe. I feel like this is the kind of book that haunts you slowly over time, whereas Foe, I was thinking about it all day, every day when I was reading that one. I think actually my opinions of these two are pretty similar. I feel like I give them different ratings throughout the vlog, but they're both in and around like a 5 out of 10 mark, because for everything that I like about them, the stuff that I don't like about them, I'm pretty like equal. I tried to assign each of them a superlative. I said that Annihilation is the most like horror feeling, though I think has the best mystery, the most like obsessive what's going on here. Also I think is the most like enjoyable, easiest read. It's funny, it's entertaining. I really struggled with these last two what to give them. Authority was the most underwhelming. It's just like the one that impacted me the least of all of these books. And then Our Wives Under the Sea I feel like is the most deep and emotional. When I finished it, like I felt kind of sick. I felt kind of sick reading most of it, and I knew what was coming in here. We got to a point and then I had a feeling anyway, and then we got to a point I was like, okay, yeah. So I'm very happy with the reading of this vlog. I wasn't scared, but all of them were horror, to be fair. I did what I set out to do. I'm kind of tempted to try and do this vlog again though, and see if I can actually get spooked. Anyone wants to see that, please let me know. Have you read any of these books? What were your thoughts and opinions on them? Do you want to read any of them? What are your horror recommendations, please? I've babbled on enough. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a spooky morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!